Hello, everyone. I'm Mickey Desdovich, and welcome to SBIFF Film Talk. Tonight, we'll be discussing the film High Chaparral, and here is a teaser for the film.
When I first got to High Chaparral, I felt happiness and unhappy at the same time.
My grandfather built this place with the philosophy of the American settlers.
I did not choose to leave Syria, but I had to.
I don't think that the refugee understand this place really.
And our guest tonight is director David Freid. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This is really cool.
Yeah, thank you. We love the film, and we've had you here at the festival a few times, so I thought we'd bring you back to discuss the film a little bit more in depth, since we don't always get so much time during the Q&As at the festival. So yeah, David, how about you start out with how did you get involved with this topic and finding out about High Chaparral?
Oh man, it's kind of circuitous. There wasn't like a direct path to it. I had just started, this was back in 2016, I guess. I just started a new film production company called Mel Films. And I was trying to figure out what the tone and the voice of the company was. I didn't know who we were yet. And I knew that there was a lot of competition for making short films online. I knew that a lot of that took place in Los Angeles and New York. And I figured I might have an easier time kind of making a dent in the industry if I left those two cities and filmed abroad. So that was the first thought that went into it. The second was I missed my friend's wedding in Sweden, and I wanted to visit him, and I was looking for any reason to get out there. And I was Googling around, and I mean, you might as well throw, a dart at a board when you're using the world as a possible, platform for a film. And so I just came across this poorly translated sentence in a newspaper, in a local newspaper, that said something about refugees living in a Wild West theme park. And I mean, obviously there's, as a log line, there's not much better than you can get. And so I sent that to my friend who lives in Sweden to sort of verify it for me that this was really a thing. This theme park was closed for the winter, obviously. There was no help desk to call or anything like that. He just so happened to live about an hour away from the park, and he drove there for me. And he verified that, yes, there were going to be 500 refugees moving into this theme park. And at the time with this company, I certainly wanted to take on bigger projects with bigger hearts, projects with bigger thoughts in mind, but I don't know that I had a buy-in completely yet from the people who financed me. So the angle of the cowboy, the Wild West, the Americana found in the snowy forests of Sweden was enough of a pitch on that end. And then, the refugee angle was the thing that, I really wanted to explore, that me and my team really wanted to explore and get into. And at the time, pre-Trump era, it seems like the news cycle has just gone insane since then. But 2016, right before Trump, this was all over the news. The Syrian refugee crisis was the big news story. It's crazy how it disappeared, because these people didn't disappear. But we get like fatigue after a while about a news story, and we move on. And even at the time, people were getting, I hate to say this sounds callous, but it felt like people were getting bored. It felt like everybody saw these migrants washing up onto some distant Greek shore in tiny little rubber boats. People were dying in the water, babies were dying in transit. And it's horrible. And there's only so much that I guess that a person can take and see. And then they kind of just feel helpless, and they feel like that there's nothing you can really do about it. And here's an example of somebody's doing something about it, and something really unique and interesting about it. And, as a filmmaker, that it checks so many boxes, right? Because I have a goal of as a documentary filmmaker, hopefully enlightening and educating myself and my viewers in some way or another. But also I have the responsibility of entertaining. And there is such an entertaining angle built into this. And I would hope that if someone were to stick around for that, you know, at the time, 9 minutes, that's the length of this film, was like, you know, War and Peace for the internet, you know. When we started, we were told that we should make films 3 minutes long, that they should be square in shape, and that they should have words on the bottom because no one's listening, you know. So this was a gamble going all the way to 9 minutes and trying to make it a little cinematic. And I would hope that if somebody sat through that and they were pulled in by the strangeness of the plot, that perhaps they left with something bigger. Perhaps they changed in some way. I know I did.
Yeah. Now you deal with like tough subject matters, but what you do beautifully with many of your films is you bring in this humor to it, so it is entertaining. So then people are focused on the subject matter itself that most people shy away from when they're watching just news documentaries and having to learn just by watching the news. But you do a different way of teaching people. Can you talk a little bit about coming up with that concept of being entertained and showing such tough topics?
Yeah. Well, entertainment first for me. You know, I come from a narrative background. I went to the American Film Institute. I thought I was going to be in, you know, scripted projects and stuff like that. You know, the world takes a lot of turns in your life. You know, you don't know exactly where you're going to end up. And I decided to get into journalism randomly, and that cinematic background that I had was very helpful for me in that world, because even just a few years ago, it's crazy to think of now, but even just a few years ago, the biggest agencies like New York Times and, you know, all these, they have incredible storytellers, incredible photographers, you know, yet what they were making on the documentary side, on the film side, was still, you know, a handheld iPhone or whatever the personal camera was at the time, recorded by some writer, cut together by somebody who just learned Final Cut or something, you know. So the mere fact that I came in there with like a tripod was revolutionary. It felt so cinematic. And when I was working for companies like that, I couldn't quite be myself, you know. When you work for the New York Times, you're Timesian. You have to learn the Times way. When you work for any of these sort of larger companies, I just did a project for NBC, you know, and there's a bunch of rules that you have to follow when you're doing a project for NBC. And a lot of the times, once, you know, an idea goes through enough creative executives, it comes out the other side a lot different than when it went in. And so, you know, that sense of humor that you're talking about, I think, is probably more of a worldview than anything else. It's not that it's unintentional. I certainly do look for the humor in the world, and I think that I probably bring out a bit of humor in people, just in my nature. But I also try and hold back. I don't want to go so far. It's a very delicate balance. If you go too far, everything becomes just for yucks, and you forget that you're there for a reason, you know, and you forget to take these people seriously, and you have to have a good balance, you know. You guys played a film called Guns Found Here a couple of years back, or last year. Time is strange now.
It was last year, yeah.
Was that last year?
Yeah.
You know, in that film, these characters were wonderful because they were simultaneously like really funny, like genuinely funny people. I get a lot of comments that they belong in a sitcom. And then on the other hand, they're heroic. They're conquering this barbaric system of gun tracing in America. And you really have to make sure that both sides of that are seen. In High Chaparral, it haunts me a little bit. I sometimes wonder if I went too far in the direction of the Wild West theme park. And if I did, maybe I could blame the 9-minute runtime, you know, or the financier, or the, you know, by the way, the financier was amazing. But you know, this was an experiment. This was not exactly, I don't think, what they signed up for, you know, a film about refugees. You know, there's a character in the very beginning, and he's in the trailer there. His name is Faraz, and he's one of the only characters I've ever had that after seeing the film was dissatisfied with the film. He thought that the portrayal was like a commercial for the theme park, and that the bigger issue of the refugee crisis was not a big enough center point or centerpiece or focus. And that sticks with me. That sucks. That sucks that he feels that. I did everything I could to try and tell a story that would draw on a new viewer, I guess, and enlighten somebody who wasn't already kind of addicted to news or knew that was happening, or whatever the case may be. But he didn't see it that way, because it was real for him. His whole life got uprooted. He lost family and friends to this war, and the thing that we find so captivating in that snowy Western circus mirror of Americana was just a silly backdrop to him. And so I don't know, maybe I could have been a little bit better with my balance there between the sort of strange and humorous and the profound and important.
Now, how was it for these families that you filmed during the film? How was it for them to have a camera following them around and being there? Did they understand why you were doing what you were doing?
Oh man, yeah, it was it was a constant sales pitch with everybody in some way or another. Everybody was a little bit different, there were some interesting rules there because of the culture. Like women and kids kind of had to be left alone for the most part. There were a couple of volunteers who stepped forward, like Faraz, that guy that I mentioned. Also this guy named Mahmoud, who, just to give you an idea of the range of the types of characters that we had here, Mahmoud went on to become like a YouTube star, with like, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers. I remember it was in the second film when we returned, he showed me, he posts something on his Facebook, and he got so many notifications that you could like almost watch the battery level, die on his phone. He's like, I have to turn these off. So, he was very much into the cameras being there. Whereas some others, especially in the second one, I think, you saw there were only 50 left when we went back. And because of that, there weren't so many that were interested in being on camera. And that was a little bit harder, What did they know what we were doing? I don't even know if we knew what we were doing, they knew that they were in a strange place. We knew that we were in a strange place, and we just sort of turned the cameras on, and hopefully, a couple of them sort of, unlike for us, watched the film and felt like, it told their story well.
Now, you in the film, you have a really touching moment where you were showing the kids at play in the snow and everything. Can you talk a little bit about these little small moments that you picked up? Because I'm sure you probably shot more than you chose to use. Can you
Right.
talk about these little small moments of showing them somewhat at peace during a time of their own crisis that's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad that you picked up on that. In the second one, I think I keep bringing up the second one. I'm sorry to your viewers who have not seen the second film, but in the second one, there is a very literal allusion to a bomb falling at one point that then becomes a soccer ball that comes into a game, to just sort of show that contrast. Whereas in this moment that you're alluding to, it really is just kids at play, right? And I think that's just part of the surreal beauty of this moment. These kids came from a place where they wouldn't encounter snow like this. Everything was alien, even to me. The aurora borealis we saw while we were there. It was winter, so the sun was always low, which is great for a cinematographer, but it didn't offer us a lot of time. I think we had 4 hours of daylight and the rest was night. So there's a lot that you have to adapt to, and these kids, as kids do, are just so amazing at being resilient, adaptive little creatures, and they they made everything fun, you know. You know, while we were there, we might have seen some agony on the adults' faces, but we would never see that with the children. The adults did a really good job of making sure that this bizarre place was a theme park for them, which was really sweet, you know. And I think in that scene that you're talking about, they were putting sugar on snow, right? And they were eating it
Yeah.
like it was ice cream, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of moments like that. There was a whole sequence that we had to lose for time that took place in the school. You know, we show it for a second there, but you know, they did a lot. They did a lot of work. Those 500 people that live there must have been some of the luckiest, if you want to say that about somebody in that situation, because I know a lot of others. I think I can't remember the number, but I think Sweden took in like 163,000 refugees in that 1 year or something like that. You know, I don't know how I remember that one. And so here, this is only 500 people, but I know some people were living in like soccer stadiums, you know, whereas in this strange little theme park, they had set up like a learning academy for kids, and they were teaching Swedish and English classes, and they were teaching the adults how to get citizenship and how to get a job and how to integrate into the Swedish system and the Swedish way of life. So the choice on how to leave any of that on the cutting room floor probably was just based on time more than anything else. You know, you can get across the idea of an ice cream cone being basically sugar on top of snow pretty quickly, I guess.
And now the sheriff of the town, he seems to be so open-hearted and wonderful to everybody there, just to open up this facility for everyone to come to. Can you talk a little bit about him as a person and working with him?
Emil is awesome. He was our sheriff for both the first and second film. He actually stepped down. There's a new sheriff in town, the first female sheriff of High Chaparral now. In the first film, his grandfather, the man who built that place, Big Bent, was still alive. In the second film, he'd actually passed. He passed in the time between our films, which was really just a few months. And I think a lot of that big heart that you're talking about came from his grandfather. He, you know, as he expresses in the film, you know, he had a lot of these sort of like immigration ideals baked into this little America that he built, you know. And I joked with people, maybe it's not even a joke, but I said to people, you know, I often found that they were doing America better than we were. You know, we're a nation of refugees. It's our history, it's our present, it's exactly what we are, you know. And in, you know, in this little microcosm, he was able to extend that American goodness in a way that I didn't see reflected here at home. I didn't see us opening our doors so readily to that flood of refugees that was really pouring out across Europe at the time. I think Germany and Sweden took the most in, but America was a little more closed off.
Now, you may not have the answer to this one, but do you know how these 500 were chosen to end up there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was random.
It was random.
I think it's just totally random. I do remember somebody at one point saying that they did favor families in some way or another. They were looking for families, which does make sense, I suppose, given the amount of kids that were there and the school and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that had something to do with it. I remember also there was like a separate, if you remember in the film, like there was like the little bungalows, like the cabins in the woods, and then there was like the hotel. And there was another area that a lot of like the single men would stay. And then the families tended to be in those kind of cabin areas. So I think they kind of felt like they were better situated to take in families. But other than that, I think it was pretty random.
Okay. And you keep bringing up the second film, which I kind of want to touch on a little bit, and we can pitch it for everybody to go watch it because it is available on your website, I believe.
Yeah.
Still, yeah. And then, but May 8th comes around, and you return because that's when the snow is done and the park's about to open again. Can we talk a little bit about returning and seeing how it changed?
Oh, it was it hurt a little bit, honestly. And I know I don't know, maybe I'm an empath because I was feeling the hurt with Emil and with Ali. Frost was gone at that time. Mahmoud was well on his way to becoming an internet celebrity. Um, he was actually in Stockholm. We did meet him, we did film him a bit, but his storyline just took such a drastic turn that it was hard to reincorporate him. But as you can imagine, showing up there, like all those kids running around, you know, the voices, the kids on the seesaws and throwing snowballs at each other and climbing on this bizarre mini American theme park world, were gone, but you kind of felt their presence still. I don't know if it's just like a sense memory thing, you know, you like when you return to somewhere when you were a kid and you know your best friend's house is now like a Taco Bell and it's just bizarre, but you still kind of feel the space that used to be there in some way, you know. I still felt a lot of the people there, and so 500 people became 50 people got to stick around, and those 50, I don't know that they were chosen for any other reason other than the chance and timing, because I know there was a bit of the other 450 just sort of spread out into the system, spread out into the rest of the Swedish refugee world, into the various facilities that could take them. But some of them were working with the park, some of them were working with getting the park ready to open, cleaning it up, getting the rides in order, and one of them even became, which just blew my mind, a stunt performer in their gun show. Their relationship with guns there was just fascinating, which is like a whole side tangent, you know. But yeah, he was jumping off buildings and, you know, firing fake rounds and throwing fists and you know, he's so proud. I think it's in the film, he exclaims, he's just like, I feel like a real life Mexican, you know, because that's how he was
Yeah.
cast. And I just thought, my God, like what a strange turn of events for this person. So on one hand, we lost 450 souls to wherever they ended up, and I hope that they're still out there, you know, in the best possible way they can be. But on the other hand, here was a few that kept things optimistic, I guess, it would seem to be kind of a darkening world, you know. I mean, after the second film, Trump had become elected, and there was this sort of surge of populism across a lot of Europe, including Sweden, where they were telling refugees to go back home, and there were a lot of very like right-wing propagandist kind of outlets that were, you know, coming up with stories about, you know, various you know, thuggery and rape and brutalities from these, you know, refugees as evidence that they have to kick them all out and send them back to wherever they're from. And we've got a pretty big microphone over here in the United States with a president that's saying a lot of similar things about immigrants. And so it was just sort of a weird time in general. And as you could probably tell, that second film, Return to High Chaparral, it is a little bit less optimistic. And I think that's part of the reason I've always wanted to do a third one. So hopefully one of these days I will do the planned third one, which is Escape from High Chaparral. I'll keep the plot of that a little silent for now, but I look forward to screening it with you one of these days.
Yeah, it would be great to see that. And I actually I went down the rabbit hole a little bit today, and I was reading comments that people were making online about the film, and a lot of things that you just said. It was quite shocking to see how people had shifted in their hatred towards.
Yes.
And it was just, I couldn't believe some of the stuff I was reading that was commented under the film after all these years, and
yeah.
It was quite shocking to me. So, yeah, it's.
Man, I haven't gone on that rabbit hole. Maybe I shouldn't. My God.
No, I'd probably stay away from it. But it would be great to see a follow up, a third one, to see how everything's going over there. And then also, I want to talk a little bit about how this all really lines up. Here we have the history of America. People traveled west to you know, relocate, find new jobs, start a new life, have a new journey. And it's so interesting that there's this this theme park that is the Old West, and here you have a bunch of people trying to start a new life and a new journey. Can you talk a little bit about how interesting that lineup was when you realized it?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's so so much so that if you see in the second uh, part episode film, in that sequel, I actually got sort of an expert of the American West to help,
Yeah,
rap poetic a little bit about it, because I felt like that couldn't be hit too hard. That plot point couldn't be hit too hard for anybody who missed it in the first one, who missed this just incredible symmetry in storyline, about what America was and should be versus what America is in this microcosm, and what they created and how they were inspired. And yeah, I think I don't know that I noticed. I don't know that I saw that right away. I think I saw it more in the edit room, because of essentially how people were responding, how people in the theme park were responding to the refugees, and how sort of like, and not only in the theme park, but honestly, everyone I met. This is anecdotal, but like, I remember like our server in a restaurant in Stockholm while we were there. We would just randomly would just talk to people about the refugees, just to get a poll, get a what people are thinking. And his instant response was, well, we have to help. Of course we have to help. We have to do something. I mean, we can't do nothing, And that's what we encountered everywhere over there, was this sort of knee jerk, we need to be good. And boy, I could go down like a real political rant here, but like, a lot of people look at Sweden as some kind of like socialist hellscape, if you're on one side of the political spectrum. Yet, you look at our lead character there, the cowboy Emil. He drives a Tesla. He owns a theme park. In this socialist world that you've concocted, that wouldn't really happen, right? But they've come up with a system that works really well. That is sort of a quasi-socialist, quasi-capitalist system in which everybody does good. The baseline for everyone in that population is high. The quality of life, the standard of living is high. And so when all of those refugees were pouring in, I guess because it's already sort of inherent in their culture that everyone should be doing good at a baseline, they thought that of the people coming in too. But it will never cease to amaze me how inspired they were by the history of America. And also, I didn't know this, but there was a huge migration from Sweden and a lot of the Nordic countries into America during the first couple of world wars in the first half of the last century. And a lot of them came to, like you said, to stake a claim in the West, to build a life. They had this tiny, tiny amount of money, tiny amount of land, whatever the case may be, but they had a big dream, and there was a place that you could accomplish that dream. So I think that's also embedded in their culture still, the history of that movement. I don't want to give numbers because I know I'd be wrong, but I'm pretty sure a staggeringly large percentage of Swedish people came to America at one point. I think that's why we have the Great Lakes region, as it were.
Yeah, I'll fact check you on that one. No.
Yeah, I don't remember what the number was. I just remember looking at it and going, dang, that's way more. And so it's culturally, it's there still. Culturally they talk about it. It's part of their mythology still.
Well, wonderful, David, and I appreciate you joining us tonight and shedding light on this film. And I hope everybody catches the second one, and I really hope that you are able to make the third one. I would love to see it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh man, it was a blast. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
You're perfect, David. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.